Thanks for joining us for the Sustainable Phosphorus webinar series. Our installment today is about H2Ohio's phosphorus efforts. And I'm just going to go through a few intro slides here, and then we'll get right to the talk. A little bit about the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. We're a members organization, and we work in North America to advocate for the sustainable use, recovery, and recycling of phosphorus in the food system. We're supported by a cadre of members that you see here. These are all great companies who've lent their support to our efforts, including paying us to help put on this webinar. So we appreciate their support. And if you'd like to join and become a member of the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, please reach out to us at phosphorusalliance.org, and we can discuss options with you there. I also want to let you know that in August, we're going to be having another webinar, and this is on urine diversion and recovery. So the webinar is called P-Cycling. We'll have a great cast of characters for that one too. So Abe Nohayes from Rich Earth Institute, Trevor Boyer, my colleague here at Arizona State, Madeline Dubois from the Ladin Institute, and Matthew Lippincott from the University of Michigan. And we'll be talking about everything from installing facilities to divert urine using plumbing. We'll be looking at regulations around urine diversion and the use of it in agriculture. We'll be looking at some land application studies and a bunch of other stuff. So if you want to check out that webinar, you can subscribe to our newsletter, and you can do that at phosphorusalliance.org/contact. And that newsletter comes out quarterly, and it'll give you an idea of what our events are coming up. You can also follow us on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky, where they're also under Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. Okay, with that, we're going to be talking about Lake Erie today, and Ohio more broadly, and their water quality programs. So Lake Erie's long been a water body of high interest to the phosphorus sustainability community because of its history of massive and damaging harmful algal blooms, including the one that shut down the city of Toledo's drinking water supply in 2014. And in response, in 2019, the state of Ohio launched its H2Ohio program to focus on improving water quality across the state. And that includes Lake Erie and Maumee River, Detroit River, a bunch of other places. But thus far, the program's allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to phosphorus reduction projects. And we'll be hearing today about some of those projects in technology, some of the technology assessment behind those projects, and then some of the projects themselves in drainage, water management, manure management, and other things. We're joined both by the organizers of the program, and that's Ohio EPA, and some of the participants. So I'll be introducing them with bios as we go along. And we'll start with the first presentation now from David Emerman from Ohio EPA. So David became district chief of the Ohio EPA's Northeast District Office in January 2023. And previously, his roles included assistant chief of the Division of Surface Water, general counsel for the Ohio Lake Erie Commission, and a litigator for the Ohio Attorney General's Office. He holds a law degree from Cleveland State University and a degree in environmental science and chemistry from Miami University. And David, I'll just go ahead and advance your slides if you just tell me next slide when your slide comes up.
Thank you so much, Matt. So as Matt mentioned, my name is David Emerman. I'm Chief Community Officer for Ohio EPA. And my goal is to help communities and businesses thrive through environmental protection and economic development. And part of that is helping out with this H2Ohio program. And I'll talk about kind of what my role in it is, and a little bit more in a second here. So starting off with just H2Ohio. So this is the governor's comprehensive water quality initiative created in 2019. And Matt, you touched on this a bit, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail. But it's about $100 million a year. We do it in bienniums here, biennium budget in the state of Ohio. So in our current biennium, it's $270 million towards solving really tough water quality issues. And it's a number of state agencies that are involved in this. You can see on the very bottom of that slide there, Department of Agriculture, is enrolling and promoting best management practices in Northwest Ohio and other parts of the state. Department of Natural Resources is building wetlands, among other things. So far, it's about 14,521 acres of wetland and ecosystem restoration that helps capture nutrients and otherwise benefit the environment. My agency, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, is doing a lot in terms of getting rid of septic systems, bringing water to folks that didn't have access to water, upgrading sewage systems, and replacing lead service lines. So quite a lot there, and you'll see the Ohio Lake Erie Commission as well. So this is a state commission that's really focused on protecting Lake Erie and helps really oversee and manage this H2Ohio program. As you mentioned, Matt, I used to work for the Ohio Lake Erie Commission, and I'll give a special shout out. I saw as one of the attendees was my previous boss, Joy Molinex. And when she started, I think that was in 2018 or 2019, we had a lot of folks coming to us with really innovative technologies for addressing harmful algal blooms on Lake Erie. And this is kind of right on the heels of our Toledo water crisis in 2014, where the director of Ohio EPA at the time had to issue a do not drink order. And as I think a lot of people know, that's different than a boil advisory. A do not drink means don't drink the water coming out, even if you boil it. In fact, boiling it could make it worse. And so it was a challenge getting water to all those nearly 1 million people in that area. And so rightfully so, all these people came with some really innovative technologies and said, this is your solution. This here, if you implement this, then it'll solve your problems on Lake Erie. And by the way, if you don't do it, you're a criminal, right? So, they were aggressive on it, but rightfully so. They are people passionate about some really fantastic technologies. But the problem always became when I said, okay, how does it work? And they said, well, I can't tell you that. It's proprietary. And you could sign all these non-disclosures, and then we can release some of this stuff to you. But as a state agency, we really didn't have the ability to sign non-disclosures. In fact, almost anything somebody submitted to us could become a public record. So that was one kind of impediment that we had towards some of this innovation. Likewise, a lot of these technologies hadn't really yet been tested in some of the other places in the country. So there wasn't a lot to benchmark against. But yet a lot of them seemed really promising. Some seemed like snake oil, right? So that was also the other problem is how do we then distinguish what are the real promising technologies and what are things that aren't quite going to pan out, and where should we invest our money? So this is where the H2Ohio Technology Assessment Program was born. And this was a subset of that larger H2Ohio program. So Bryan Stubbs, he's going to be speaking later. Right before we launched this, and right before I started pitching this to my boss at the time, Bryan and I met for coffee, and it was interesting because we kind of had a similar idea right at the same time, and saying, well, we got to have a way to promote these technologies and advance this within Ohio. And so him and I started kind of working out what this program could be. And what we realized is it needs to have a lot of involvement from some key stakeholders and experts in the industry. So we formed what's called the H2Ohio TAP team. You could see the logos there on the screen right now. And this is a mix of public sector entities, private sector companies that donated their time to this and their expertise, and also NGOs and other trade associations. So this group, we met quite a lot. I could not stress enough how much these folks from these entities donated their time to this. And we developed a request for technologies where we said, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Tell us your good ideas. And then we can then advance this and then hopefully at the end, do these demonstration projects. But by the way, no guarantee at the end. That was another kind of tricky part to it. So luckily, we developed this request for technologies, and then we got a great response to it. Like I said, with no promise at the end, but a lot of people passionate, a lot of great technologies submitted to us, and then this team narrowed them down to what I call the top 10. And we took those top 10 technologies and retained a third-party consultant. So in this case, it was Tetra Tech, and they really looked at, okay, is this technology viable? Is it scalable? What would be the cost of it? And the way that this entity was able to work is Tetra Tech could enter into these non-disclosure agreements. So these technologies could then provide that proprietary information and be protected. And Tetra Tech created a very large report on the viability of these technologies, including what some of the data gaps were, or how do we continue to bring these to market. From there, we took that report and through Joy and others, brought this to, among other entities for funding, US EPA's Great Lakes Program Office. So they are the US EPA entity that administers the Great Lake Restoration Initiative, which is a large amount of federal funding. And we said, which of these do you like? Which of these do you want to do demonstration projects on? And Glen Poe, as they're called, US EPA, picked the technologies and said, here are technologies we want to see advanced. We want in-the-ground work being done. And so what I'm going to do here is talk about a few of those technologies that are advancing right now to the demonstration phase. And we have some projects going on right now. So Matt, if you could go to the next slide. This is the technology I am very excited about. It is a type of fertilizer put out by the Andersons, which is a very large company located, headquartered in Northwest Ohio. And this is a sophisticated type of fertilizer in that the binder that holds the fertilizer together is water soluble. But the actual fertilizer, which is a struvite, is not water soluble. Instead, it's soluble by the type of acids that plant roots would put out when they need that phosphorus. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner of this slide, you can see some of the leachate testing that the Andersons has done with this study. And you can see on the left, when there's almost no bar graphs, that's how much phosphorus was coming out from the struvite. From this type of fertilizer. And the bars to the right of that are the traditional fertilizers. And what the Andersons, through their own research, had determined was that you could actually apply a half rate of struvite and get equivalent yield to traditional fertilizers. So I said to the Andersons, well, this seems amazing, right? What do you need from us? And what they really needed was they needed a third party to come and do this, because any company can say that their product's great, but you need a third independent study to show, to prove or validate or not, right, those claims. And so we are working with Ohio State University, who is applying struvite, this DG struvite, onto fields in real world applications, and is able to study that. So next slide, please. So one thing that's amazing about this type of fertilizer, and one thing that was really important to farmers, is that it needs to be applied with traditional equipment, right? The equipment that they already have when they're applying commercial fertilizer. So you can see an application in October, and this was applied for the existing, with existing equipment that the farmer had on the field. Now this is granular, but they also have a new way of applying this as a liquid application as well. So no matter how a farmer's applying commercial fertilizer, you can apply this type of fertilizer. Next slide, please. And so what we did was we applied this and traditional fertilizer in both half rate and full rate, and a number of different test strips on a field in Sandusky County. And we're really looking at, in this study, nothing to do with water quality. This is yield. So we're looking at, is it true that you can apply a half rate of struvite and get an equivalent yield? Next slide, please. But at the same time, we do want to test the water quality claims. So we have a few fields that we're developing that have water control equipment on them and a monitoring equipment. And we're looking at struvite in half rate and full rate with some controls and water quality monitoring at the edge of each field to say, okay, yes. At the same time as we're looking at the yield component of this, can you apply a half rate of struvite? We're also looking at the water quality claims as well. Is it keeping the phosphorus on the fields? Next slide, please. So the next technology that we're looking at here switches the side. So no longer looking at commercial fertilizer application, but saying, okay, well, what about manure? And manure is a big topic in Ohio because we have a lot of hog farms, dairy farms, cattle farms, chicken farms, and we see that the manure from there, in many cases high in phosphorus, is an opportunity, right? So it's a potential liability if it gets into the water, right? And in which case it could contribute to overall aquifers. But it's also an opportunity because by using that, we're able to offset commercial fertilizer. Look at the side of that hog barn on the right. You can see a little trailer there. This is a type of technology. It's a quick wash type technology. And what it is it's treating the manure from these hog farms, and you can see how low profile that is. You can pull this trailer up onto the farm, treat, and move. Next slide, please. So here's a close-up of the operation. And really what this is looking to do is separate out the different benefits from the manure. So it's stabilizing it and it's separating it. And as everything we've seen with manure and all the research that we've shown is it's definitely an opportunity, but you have to separate out the different components of it to really be able to take advantage of that. Next slide, please. So the first step of that is separating out just the solid organic material. So this KDS system, there's nothing all too special about this. It's really dewatering, getting out those solids. Now that they call it a cake there, right? You could add that right to a field as is. It's high in organics, which is good, high in phosphorus. It is a good fertilizer to add to the fields, and it's easy to transport. Next slide, please. So, but then you end up having a good amount of liquid that's still high in phosphorus and high in nitrogen. So what the next part of this process is being able to precipitate out that phosphorus. And by switching quickly between a high pH and low pH, it forces that phosphorus down onto the bottom. And so this is the trailer that is performing that work. Next slide, please. And this is what you end up with, right? You end up with that solid phosphorus, mostly solid phosphorus at the bottom that requires further dewatering, and then this kind of liquid nitrogen at the top. And from an economic standpoint, this has always been the tough nut to crack here in Ohio. Is to make this work economically, you need to be able to recover that nitrogen, and this is really what our demonstration project is looking to do. Is company here is able to claim that that they can now recover that liquid nitrogen in ammonium salt, and then have those as separate components. You can add that nitrogen directly to the field. So dewatering that solid phosphorus on the bottom, and then turning that liquid into nitrogen. So all these photos here were taken from Indiana. They're not even from Ohio, but this was the first kind of part of the project. We weren't paying for this. This is a USDA project that we're butting up right up against, and now they're starting to operate just 10 miles down the road, but now across the border in Ohio, where we're actually recovering the nitrogen as well as the phosphorus here. Next slide. So this is a flow chart about the of the process. Really, the big keys to this are dewatering and getting that phosphorus and nitrogen out of that water source. Next slide. And so what we asked is another company that was working in this space, and it applied to us, Kurtz Brothers. Their philosophy is really looking at the soil in Ohio and saying, is it really just about adding more phosphorus and nitrogen? And their answer is no, right? It's adding organics. So they're looking at how do you optimize that? How do you add a number of different sources, blends to these fields, including that processed manure and nitrogen and other types of organics to add more value to these fields, better water retention, better grain distributions and structure of those soils, more organics on their soils. Next slide, please. So they've created a number of different soil blends, heavy on organics, biochar, processed manure, and we'll be applying these to test plots in Northwest Ohio and looking at how it adds to their organic content on their fields, and then how that improves yield and retention of nutrients. Next slide, please. Another really cool technology that was applied to us is called electric cell lysis. So this machine here could come right up to either a hog farm or a dairy farm, but they're going to be their demonstration projects to be in a dairy farm, and it's kind of like a pump and treat. This equipment here pumps the manure through it, and actually has these precise electrical pulses that will lyse right through the cells, reducing odor, reducing pathogens, killing the cell, and precipitating out the phosphorus. And what we're really looking at here is, well, what is the application for this? This is a cool technology. It seems to have a very good function. How does this fit into the marketplace? And this company that owns this technology, they're not normally in this space. Normally what they do is electrical scrubbers for big industrial manufacturing, for air quality purposes. So they're kind of new to this area. So again, thank you to Bryan Stubbs and Cleveland Water Alliance. They're partnering with this company, Nurendorfer, to look at what a demonstration project would be for this new market for this company. Next slide. I asked them, I said, well, how does it work? And so they opened it up for me. And I said, do you mind if I share this slide with people? And they said, yeah, don't worry. No one's going to understand what this means. All right. So I said, yeah, I don't understand what this is under here, but it's an electrical box of some sort. And they have very precise electrical pulses that come through. Next slide. All right. So automated drainage water management. This is one that we were super excited about as well. We have a lot of farmland in Northwest Ohio. We have 4 million acres of farmland in our Western Lake Erie Basin. And in the Maumee watershed alone, I think it's like 2 million acres. Almost all of it is tiled. I asked our Department of Agriculture, said, how much is tiled? They said, all of it is tiled. And I think it's interesting talking to people from Arizona here. We have a different problem than you have. Right. I imagine in Arizona, there's probably a lot of irrigation that goes on. Well, in Northwest Ohio, not a lot of farmers are irrigating their soils. Not a lot, right? In fact, we are pulling water off our fields. But one of the groups that apply to us, David White's group, who was about to talk to us, it submitted this idea for automated drainage management. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm not going to tell you about his technology. I'm going to turn it over to Dave. And Dave, if you don't mind telling us about this amazing work that you guys are doing.
Great.
Great. And before that, maybe Dave, I'll read a bio for you. And thanks a lot there, David, for the introduction to the program. For everyone's edification, Dave White's got quite an impressive resume. He's had over 33 years of professional leadership experience in natural resource conservation with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Dave was chief of the agency from January 2009 to December 2012, where he led, directed, and managed the nation's largest private lands natural resource conservation organization. In addition to his work with NRCS, he's also spent significant time on Capitol Hill working in Senator Tom Harkin's office, where he helped craft the conservation title of the 2008 Farm Bill, and Senator Richard Lugar's office, where he helped develop the conservation title of the 2002 Farm Bill. So Dave, I'll pass it over to you now. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can get going.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate the introduction there, Matthew. We're going to go through this. David talked a little bit about drainage. We're going to have a little 101 on drainage just to set the stage. In this country, tile drainage started late 1800s. This is from the New York Times in 1910 in Iowa. Farmers were going to spend $307 million to drain the lands. And by the way, that's over $3 billion in today's dollars. In the early years, it was hand dug trenches. You can see the tiles right here. And then they used the steam power to do the bigger ones. And of course, today, a lot of advances in the machines are much different than what they were in 1910. But as a result of that, this is really shows you where the subsurface drainage is in the United States. And you see that Ohio is pretty much in the heartland of that. We think NRCS is estimating there's about 30 million acres of tile drained land in this upper Midwest. And here's what the issue is. The photo on the left is an actual named stream in Iowa, believe it or not. And you see this buffer that are on both sides of it. It's deeply incised. But this buffer should be filtering the runoff, but you're only getting limited surface runoff because you look down here, this is the pipe, the subsurface tile. So all this, a lot of that water is actually bypassing the buffer and going directly into the water course. And if we had intentionally set out in the early 1900s to design a system that would efficiently and quickly transfer dissolved nutrients to surface water, this would be it. This is a free-flowing tile drain here. Most of the tile drain in the United States is free-flowing. We also, we're going to get into the managed here shortly, but these are really the three reasons why we're seeing such increased nutrient. One, we're using more fertilizers. Two, we've shifted from forage and small grains to mostly corn and soybean, large grain production. And three, the point of this particular presentation is we've altered the hydrology. We move the water off really efficiently. David didn't talk about this, but this is a picture of the hypoxic zone, the Gulf of Mexico. So all these nutrients that are washing off our fields are coming out of the tiles or coming down here. And this is actually a picture from underneath. There's just no oxygen there once all the stuff starts growing. I think this is from Western Lake Erie. This was around the time period that David talked about for what happened in Toledo. So let's talk a little bit about water. And this is related directly to crop production. All the conservation in the world won't do us any good if the farmer can't make any money. But Dr. Chad Hard, Iowa State, looked at the causes for crop loss in Iowa. And he looked at corn from 1948 to 2010, soybeans 1955 to 2010. And these were the losses: flood, frost, hail, insects, etc. But I want to draw your attention to the red and the blue. It's either not enough water or too much water. So how we manage water is critically important for crop production. You see in corn, you've got 67% of the causes of crop loss are either too much or not enough. 55% for soybeans. So this is very much in a farmer's interest that they manage this water. So what is drainage water management? Basically, it's practices that capture, collect, or process nutrients that come out of tile drain lands that are already drained. We are not doing any new drainage in the United States, at least for agricultural purposes. First, we'll talk a little bit about bioreactors. You see a control structure here. What you do is you cut the pipe from the field. You dig a big hole, fill it with wood chips, which is basically just carbon. source for the critters, and then it comes out the other end. And this carbon source is just a home for the bacteria and fungi that are going to break down the nitrate. You know, and just as we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, these microorganisms breathe in the nitrate and breathe out nitrogen gas, which harmless and leaves to the atmosphere. So here's a picture of it. It's just a big hole in the ground filled with wood chips. And you can, this would be covered with dirt or soil, I'm sorry. And then you could actually farm over it. And these things last 20 years. So it's a one-time investment, but it does last for a couple decades. The second thing we'll talk about briefly is saturated buffers. And here you see the pipe from the field going into the water body over here. And you put a control structure here, you cut the pipe, and then you divert the water, both sides, through the buffer. So there's where you're cutting the pipe, and you see the one going off to the left here that's going to run underneath the buffer. So here's another illustration of it. You've got the drainage from the field, and it's diverted into the perforated tubing that's going to run, and it will slowly filter under the ground, and the roots of the trees will, or the grasses will take up the nutrients. All right, drainage water management. Here's a seasonal schedule. David showed one of these pictures before. In the springtime, here's your control structure, okay? You cut the water line, and this is what's going to control the water in the field. So in the spring, you open it up so the field dries out so the producer can get their water or get their equipment into the field. Then in the summer, this is the critical period of time for crop production. You want to close this off. You want to manage the water. You want to keep this water as close as you can to that root zone so it wicks up. So this way, the nutrients that are in this groundwater are actually being used for the crop. I mean, the farmer has paid for this nitrogen and phosphorus. They would like to see it used to increase their yields instead of running out here in the waterways where it does no one any good. So summertime is the management season. In the fall, you open the gates back up, the water, you drain the groundwater out, and so it dries the field out so you can get your crops in, your equipment in to harvest the crop. And in the winter, shut it off, just shut it. There's no need to even let it run in the wintertime. So that would be kind of the manual drainage. And we've had like 20 years to really use this practice, but it's kind of labor intensive. You have to go out to the back 40 and you have to raise and lower those stop logs manually. There's equipment that does it, but you have to raise and lower them to adjust the water level in the field. And it's just not catching on. We looked at 12 years of data from NRCS, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And in that 12-year period, just over 105,000 acres of manual drainage water management have been implemented nationwide. You heard David say you have over 4 million acres just in Ohio. We've got 30 million acres of tile drain land in the upper Midwest. So we're just touching the surface. We're not even doing that. And the problem, in my view, is what happens with manual DWM. It's like the Showtime rotisserie. You set it and forget it. So with automated drainage water management, we've overcome one of the big hurdles, and that is to reduce the labor associated with the manual. So if you think that about 49% of the cropland in Ohio has tile drainage, this new system is substantially easier. It offers timely control of the water discharge, and it's just the growth options are incredible. We do have limited research on drainage water management. And from Matt Helmer's Iowa State 2022, from manual, they reduced nutrient loading from 25 to over 50% for dissolved phosphorus, 17 to 94% for nitrates. And basically that reduction is coming from reducing the volumes of water that are coming off. And we really want to find out how ADWM affects that. Here's the components in the system. You've got a waterproof enclosure, you got a solar panel to keep everything charged up. Down here is your actual control box. You've got a programmable logic computer right here, and we've got firmware that manages the timing of the valves that are in the control structure and when they're raised and lower, and they also will transmit the data. Whoops, what happened here? So this is the inside of the box right here, what it looks like at one of those systems. And when they're fully automated, you can control it, you can measure it, you can report it. And if water quality trading ever comes about, this system would be very valuable for a producer to be actually quantify what they're doing. So let's just briefly go over some of the comparison. And of course, in my view, this is the big one, the labor. Manual, you have to go to the field to raise and lower those stop logs. Automated, you don't. In full disclosure here, I have a Y chromosome. So telling me not to do something is something that comports very well with my genetic predisposition. Remote access you have, instantaneous real-time control, yes. Data recording, yes. Line of sight, yes. And you can use your own management judgments here. So there's a lot of advantages to this. Now let's go a little bit back to what David explained first up about the technology assessment program. This is a very nice way, conduct a comprehensive evaluation of selected technologies. I think David said it best. How do you separate the real stuff from the snake oil? And to assess the performance of ADWM is what they were looking at, and to use a documented, consistent approach. And on the right, you'll see all the elements. This took several months. We had to provide tons of information to Tetra Tech. But these are two quotes from the Tetra Tech draft assessment. They felt that ADWM is very likely to be effective at reducing nutrient loading to Lake Erie. And of course, it's in direct proportion to how many producers do it, how many farmers take it up. They didn't find any negative impacts. And then down here, I think is a very important part. So they said the enhancement that it offers is a huge improvement that requires less labor intensive. I think that's just the biggest thing. So this is from the key findings from the Tetra Tech report. One, it's more effective than manually. Two, it's cost effective compared to others. There's financial assistance for farmers and potential crop yield increases, which make it even more cost effective. Strong potential for scalability. You bet, if you've got 4 million acres, that's quite a bit of potential for scalability. But they also said that the key to adoption of this is going to require further evaluation. And that's the next item. So the barriers really to manual are pretty significant. And we think ADWM overcomes many of these. But the research validation is going to be critical if this technology is going to be widely adopted. So there was 2 grants we were working on with Ohio State. The first one came from the Ohio Water Development Authority. And these are all flowing from the H2O Ohio effort that they started there. Ohio State applied for this. We are one of the key partners. And it's wanting to actually measure the outcomes for nitrogen and phosphorus loss. What happened to the yield? What's the return on investment? And it's comparing both free drainage, which we talked about, which runs 24/7, 365, and manual drainage. We're working in 4 different counties, and what we're doing is pairing an automated system, 2 automated systems with 2 free drainage systems, and then 2 automated systems with 2 manual systems. So there's going to be 1 site each, and there's 4 counties, David: Defiance, Hancock, Hardin, and Henry. And those will be really, really, really scrutinized and monitored. And this directly responds to the TAP, the technology assessment, which says additional research is needed for how a DWM performs instead of relying on the old DWM studies as surrogates. This particular one, I think, was $426,000. And about half came from Ohio Water Development, and half came from Ohio State and ESE. And then the second one, this one originated with US EPA through their Great Lakes Initiative. EPA in Washington, D.C. Transferred some money to the Ohio EPA, and they offered this as a grant. And again, we applied with Ohio State University, that Drainage Management Coalition, AgriDrain, Ecosystem Services, and the Defiance County Soil and Water Conservation District. So I really want to, if there's anybody from EPA on both national and Ohio, thank you very much. This was a $500,000 grant. This is going to be a game changer for us, because it's going to be in one watershed, Lost Creek watershed. That's in Defiance County. And what it's doing is we're installing 10. Whoops, sorry about that. Doggone it. I told you I needed a 10-year-old for this. So it's going to be 10 ADWM systems in a concentrated area. You know, the previous one, we're going to monitor, we're going to get good results, but this is a cluster of them. And we've got a pour point identified. This is going to have the full data services and support. We're also going to develop a decision support tool for farmers that can use. And again, the evaluations are just going to be really great. The first grant we talked about, the 4 paired sites, those sites have been selected, the equipment's installed, monitoring will start in this year. And this one, we've got the sites installed, and we'll be working to install the equipment. I think 2027 is when we'll have the final results. But this, David, is going to be the proof in the pudding. A little bit about phosphorus here, because this is so new. We are working with Kaiser and Associates. This is going to be, David, forgive me, this is in Michigan, one of those other states. But he's developed a capture treatment boxes. They're patent pending, and it's to remove the field scale phosphorus. They're looking at, the dissolved phosphorus. Everything here meets NRCS practice standards, and the media is either going to be biochar or activated alumina. And here's a little picture of it. Again, you've got the control structure where you cut your pipe, and then you're going to run it through these filter boxes. Here's a picture of the filter box at the bottom. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Bryan.
Great, thanks so much, Dave, for that talk. I've got a Dave and a David here I gotta keep track of. That was great. And just a reminder to everyone, we've had one question come in through the Q&A, but if you have questions for any of the speakers, please go ahead and submit them to using the Q&A feature within Zoom. And we'll get to those at the end of the 3 talks. We're going to move over now to Bryan Stubbs, and I'll read his bio. And Bryan, if you kind of want to get ready, your slides ready, that'd be great. Bryan has over 20 years of experience leading technologically and environmentally focused projects in Chicago, Silicon Valley, and Ohio. As president and executive director of Cleveland Water Alliance, he oversees the development of one of the most effective water innovation clusters in North America. He earned his BA from the University of Kansas and his MBA from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and his executive MBA from the Presidio School of Sustainable Management. And so, Bryan, if you want to go ahead and take charge, we just need you to put your slides in the slideshow mode.
Matt, thanks for having us here, and David, always good to be on a webinar with you. Next slide, please. So I'm Bryan Stubbs. I'm the executive director and president of the Cleveland Water Alliance. You can go and click another slide. There you go. We're a water-based innovation cluster, and what is a cluster? Well, that's a fancy Harvard term for a type of economic development that really centers on having three key components to driving economic development. That first being on research and Research One institutions. So for us, people like Ohio State and Case Western. That second leg being corporate partners, which we have a whole bunch that I'll show you in a minute. And that third being around, government partners like the Ohio EPA, NASA, NOAA, et cetera. Next slide, please. And we're 10 staff members, about a 2.5 annual budget. Next slide. So yeah, when we talk about our ecosystem and ecosystem development, this is just a snapshot of a few of our partners, but I thought it was important to get an idea of how broad and how wide it is. Again, over 100 corporate partners, over 30 utility partners, which is a key component to a lot of our work, and more than 23 Research One institutions at this point. And while Cleveland's in our name, we work all throughout the Great Lakes region. We're a global destination for all sorts of technology. In fact, a decent portion of our deal flow actually comes from Europe, from Israel, from South Korea, and from Singapore. And then at the bottom left there, you see just some. This is, again, just a snapshot of our governmental partners, starting with Ohio. And of course, Ohio and the elected officials here in Ohio, a big thank you out to them. They support us every other year with significant funding to drive our core mission. And, outside of that, then some of those bigger federal things. Next, please. So look, what we do, and we're taking a different, perspective here. And that is, I loved hearing, from Dave on everything that he's working on. For us, that's sexy, for lack of a good term. We love that kind of stuff and everything David was talking about. But what we're interested in is accelerating technologies into the market, moving those technologies into the market, be that with a research institution, be that with an entrepreneur in their basement, be that with our government partners who have been toying around with SBIRs or SDTRs. Is the market going to support this? If not, what does it take? And how do we scale up this technology from a business sense? So through that, 4 key programs here, our Smart Lake Erie watershed, our water technology test beds, and that's really the secret sauce. We drive open innovation challenges, and then we're standing up right now an actual investment fund, so a venture capital fund, if you will, that's investing in these more promising technologies. Next slide. Thank you, Matt. So really, look, we're focused on that market growth. Where are the gaps and where do we see growth? And let's go big on accelerating those technologies that may be at one of our research institutions, maybe, in a smaller early stage accelerator. And then we take that and we say, hey, piloting options, and how do we de-risk trials? How do we pilot these? And look, this goes back not out of just wishful thinking, but a lot of work we did with McKinsey and Company 4.5, 5 years ago, just prior to the pandemic hitting. And that was, why don't we see more of these technologies getting into the market? And, there was kind of 2 key takeaways. The first key takeaway was the inability to trial and pilot these early stage innovations, and to do that with the customer and to do that in the environment is meant to be deployed in. Things often work well in a lab and a bench test, but moving them to an actual, farm field, as we've been seeing here today, or into a utility environment, much more rugged, rough. Things don't often work out that well. So it's saying, okay, let's take that bench test and turn that bench test into where the actual technology will be deployed in. And then that next point is always capital. We supply, non-dilutive grants. You heard Dave talking about the Ohio Water Development Authority. That's actually money out of the state revolving loan fund. Can we use those to do non-dilutive grant financing to evolve these? So we take a look at everything from grants in moving these technologies forward through to actual equity investments and taking a percentage in the companies. And then, of course, we are an economic development agency for the state of Ohio. So we look at anchoring these technologies, commercializing them, giving them their workforce so that they can launch here in Ohio. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, and next, please. There we go. Open innovation challenges. This is really aligning innovation focus with market need. Here's an example of this, and maybe not perfect for this audience, but I think you'll understand it. We worked with 6 utilities here in Ohio, from Cincinnati up to Cleveland, Akron, Sandusky, around developing technologies to find lead service lines without breaking ground. And we actually built a simulated pipe farm, or a research facility, where we've invited just really early stage companies to come in and trial that technology, start to evolve those technologies. We fund them with money, come back and take those improvements into the next ideation, help with the rapid prototyping. So that's an idea of open innovation challenges. We've put in over $100,000 into these early stage technologies that run from everybody from people in the garage all the way to Patel. And then the test beds, next. So the test beds are really the secret sauce here. It's really uncorked this ability to accelerate innovations into market. And when we talk about our test beds, the utility test bed is up and running. The open water watershed digital IoT, and I'm going to show you what that means in a second, is up and running. We're starting to move towards our industrial test bed. And then one of our corporate partners is Moen, the faucet company. We're working with them on water in the home, including point of use, low cost sensors that are embedded in the faucets, things like that. Next slide, please. Next, please. So, we talked about, the water IoT, this is part of our test bed. We call it a sandbox for IoT technologies. Next. What you see there is, initially what was telemetry coverage over the Lake Erie water body, as well as starting to go up the watershed. So what we did is we actually started installing gateways for telemetry, so that IoT devices, everything that Dave was talking about, where how do you automate some of these processes, they're still going to need telemetry, a way for that device, that Internet of Things device, to talk to the cloud. And if you have to do a satellite, or if you have to do a cell phone for every IoT device, it gets expensive. So we started installing something known as LoRaWAN as a version of telemetry that basically takes that cost down to about 10 cents a year. Next, please. And so now we're at about 6,200 square miles of coverage. We have over 200 IoT devices. This is digital water. When you hear people talk about digital water as an asset class, that's what we're talking about. And there on the left, you can see the growth rates. These compounded annual growth rates, or CAGR, that's massive. That gets Wall Street's attention, to be blunt. Next slide. And then, of course, all sorts of great fun data products starting to come out of this. Things that as I look through the attendees here, are things that a lot of our management and managers are looking at in terms of water quality, certainly Ohio EPA. For the first time, we're getting near real-time, if not real-time data that's highly credible data, telling us about water quality health. In the case of our utilities, is telling us about that water intake. We talked a little bit, David mentioned a little bit about Toledo. What we've done is we've installed these smart sensors and smart buoys all around the water intakes off of every county in Ohio that touches Lake Erie. And we now can do predictive analytics. And a good example there is in the Central Basin for Cleveland Water. They don't get microcystin, they don't get the nuisance blooms, but what they get is oxygen starved water, hypoxia. That is a headache from a treatment perspective. So we've been able to develop through this digital tools that give them up to 72 hours of warning before that hits. That helps them, one, with chemistry and understanding what's coming at them from a treatment perspective, but two, also from a workforce perspective. They're not calling people in at 3 a.m. saying, we just had a hypoxic moment and we're at full alert. Now they know it's coming and they can get their staffing to there. Next slide. So now Lake Erie is the most digitally connected freshwater, and you can, just go through all of these for the sake of time. These are all the sort of things that we've gotten into here with this smart Lake Erie, smart watershed. That was all a spin out of what happened in 2014 in Toledo, in partnership with everybody I'm mentioning, in partnership with NOAA and NOAA's office outside of Ann Arbor. Next slide. So look, one of my takeaways for this group, and especially our federal partners, if you have a technology that you think would be interested, you have an interest in trialing, we don't charge, but we do ask you to follow a process. So, in this case, we're showing a single intake where we get your base information, and we have to do it this way. We're a staff of 10. I have over 300 valid technologies coming at us annually. If we do those one by one as a phone call, it would take forever. So we automate this process. Next. We match this then with all sorts of great legal infrastructure. And I think I saw one of our attorneys on this call, Dave Nash, who had just been a savior in terms of helping us develop smart legal instruments. That's a win-win-win for everybody involved. The technology, where the technology is being deployed, and for us as well. And then, of course, insurance to help mitigate this risk. We have a policy with Lloyd's of London. If you asked me 5 years ago that we'd have a policy with Lloyd's of London, I would have laughed at you, but sure enough, today we do. And this is part of that secret sauce that's making our work a global destination. We can get technologies in, we can vet them, we can get them into the test bed and really find out if there's a there. Next. And then we also do custom pilots. And a good example here is we got a $6 million custom pilot with Avon Lake Regional Water right now through a company out of South Korea called TechWin. That's for on-site generation of hypochlorine, requirement by EPA standards for both drinking and wastewater. We think it's a good idea to get it off the back of trains. This is a electrochemical process, a spin out from LG Chem that's a lot more benign. And also getting to our core mission, hypo's gone up 3x in price in the last 5 years. So this is the way to control those costs, not only for the utility, but ultimately for you and I as ratepayers to our utilities. Next, please. And next. And of course, this is a broad discussion. We're working on a emerging contaminant PFAS, PFOA test bed with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. We helped spin out a microplastics capture technology through Case Western, through washing machines, of course, water energy. Nutrients is a bigger and bigger part of this. And I'm going to get into the Great Lakes Renew in one moment. Next slide, please. So look, what we're talking about here is evidence-based validation. When we talked about the H2Ohio and, the TAP program, Tetra Tech came in and did some of that early, literally bench level validation. But ultimately, you've got to provide this evidence-based validation. And that's what you hear Dave and David talking about. But rather than being ad hoc, we're systematizing it. We're de-risking, and sure enough, if we build it, will they come? They're coming, and we're seeing products get into the market considerably faster in an industry that traditionally was very static in getting things to the market. So I mentioned 300 innovators annually, and just in the last 2 years, we've deployed over 70 technologies from 13 countries. The cool thing is when they're from outside the United States, we bring them in, we get their IP done in America, and we get them to establish here in the United States, thus controlling the IP. Next slide. That's good. So, David talked about this. I just want to reiterate. So we're working right now with the Ohio EPA, again, thanks to the good graciousness of the federal EPA and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in Glen Pope on taking the project Dave talked about for a $500,000 deployment this fall. This will be the manure one. Next slide. That is shocking the electric cell lysis. Next slide. And, David didn't get into this, but, these are the sort of things that we're looking at as we scale it up. Does it hold what worked with Tetra Check in the lab? And as we're doing this, part of this that the EPA asked us to do, and I think that's one of the reasons why David reached out to us, is there's got to be the business case. We can't do these. Do they simply work or not work? Can we get them into the market? Will they be adopted into the market? Next slide. So I wanted to mention in closing, NSF had this big thing over the last year called Innovation Engines. And this is a whole new process for the National Science Foundation to get involved with economic development as part of the CHIPS Act, and to really build up some of the United States kind of core expertise. And so we're part of a successful innovation engine called Great Lakes Renew with our partners called Current out of Chicago, includes Ohio State, includes University of Chicago, Northwestern, a whole bunch of us. And it's 160 million, up to 160 million over 10 years. Of course, there's gates every couple of years, but the core of this one is sustainability around certain aspects of the water industry. I put in bold, nutrient capturing, nitrogen, phosphorus. There's going to be a lot of work that we can help with this and more money that we can put into this. The first couple of years are really about that research and lab bench testing. So if you have something, let us know, reach out to us. We'll get you engaged and get you as part of that. And then starting in year 3 through 5 is where we'll come in, building up more of our test beds to take these things out of the bench and into a systemic test bed. Of course, energy from water is part of this. And I think, you always have to remind folks, water and energy, they're connected, they're related. You don't have one without the other these days as far as clean water. And then, of course, critical minerals. Anybody on this call that is looking at this, I'd love to talk with them. And primarily, we're looking at it as things like lithium, where we can capture lithium as a waste stream and enter it back into EV manufacturing. Next slide, please. And I'll leave you with this. We all often talk about TRL levels. What we're talking about here when it comes to the Water Alliance and our accelerator is really from that 5 and above. We want to get this into the market. We want to prove that it scales up. We want to know that the entrepreneur or the founder has it to move it up. And if not, get them the help that they need from a CEO perspective, from a business leader perspective, getting them that funding that they're going to need. There's so much capital wanting to get into the water space. It's really important that we match the really cool technologies with this pent-up capital. Next slide. And just, bringing this home, if somebody comes and uses our test bed, we give them, what we call business hoteling space, a space to work in that can evolve and they can have it longer term if they need it. Research and industry collaboration, if somebody needs, an introduction to the Andersons, as David mentioned earlier, we can help with that. Market visibility and connection. We can really get massive amount of eyeballs on these promising technologies, thus customers. And of course, as I mentioned, investment and financing support. Next slide. Prototyping and manufacturing as that final piece. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to wrap up because I wanted us to have a good time for Q&A, but just wanted everybody to understand, I love the work that's going on with Ohio EPA, with Governor DeWine's H2Ohio program. And, when Dave and I were having that coffee, I was just sitting there kind of, racking my brain a bit saying, this is really cool, but it's going to be for naught if we can't get these into the market. So this is what we built in Ohio. I think it's special. So we'd love to work with you. Got my email there on the slide. Just reach out. And, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Brian. That was great. And Olga, I don't know if we have any questions in the Q&A. Is there anything we need to be answered there, or should we just go to a discussion here?
Yes, we have one question, and it was for David. It says, how do I'm sorry for Dave, how do the wood chip bioreactors fit into the plan? My understanding is that while these have great potential, there are only about 30 of these nationwide, and it's hard to scale up.
Well, you got that last part right about hard to scale up. I don't know where the 30 figure came from. I'm guessing that's a couple of years old because we're putting these things in really frequently. We've got a bunch going in Iowa, a bunch in Minnesota. But how do they fit into all this? Basically, it was just part of the presentation to explain all the drainage water management or all the practices that help manage drainage water. Bioreactors is one of them, saturated buffers is the other. But what we're really being funded for, and the bulk of the presentation was on automated drainage water management. And I would just say that David mentioned earlier about how they were bombarded with people saying, hey, I've got the solution. And automated drainage water management is a solution. There's more than one, and we're going to need more than one. What works best, in my opinion, based upon my experience, is a systems approach. So we need the ADWM, but we also need that the Anderson's phosphorus fertilizer that David was talking about. And we need some of the technologies that Bryan was going about. So if we combine all this stuff, I think we'll be well on our way to helping with the problem that besets the Western Lake Erie Basin and other parts of the U.S.
I think that's right, Dave. And it's something that Bryan and I talked a lot about as we were developing H2Ohio TAP. Is how do we get a diverse amount of type of demonstration projects? And as you'll see, the things that have come through, the Andersons has their really sophisticated commercial fertilizer. You have, and I'm going to call him out because I see him in the audience, Rick Johnson from Applied Environmental Services. For Quick Wash, looking at that manure side, and then different types of manure side, right? So, Rick is really focused on hog manure and Nurendorfer, and working with Bryan is focused more on dairy manure, and then your technology as well on that water management side of it. So I think there is no one solution, right? It's all of these tools in the toolboxes, and every time I talk to farmers. And that's one thing that we do very frequently too, is run these ideas by farmers. A lot of times I pitch an idea and they start by telling me, no, David, you're crazy. Like, that's not going to work. But if you do it a little different, it might, right? And I think listening to those stakeholders makes a huge difference, and not trying to treat every kind of area in Ohio the same. Northwest Ohio is way different than Southeast Ohio, and there's not the same solution for both.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned Rick Johnson, and if anyone wants to learn more about that technology, he actually spoke at our Phosphorus Forum. I think that was in 2020, and that video is online on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Dave, back to you on this question of drainage water management. Can you outline what the Farm Bill incentives might be to farmer adoption of that technology? You had an allusion there to EQIP, and I'm wondering what other programs, or if that's
Right.
the one to go to.
Correct. And I should tell you right now, Matthew, you're going to be one of the first to hear it. We're going to change the name from drainage water management to conservation drainage water management, because drainage has such a negative connotation. We're not going to reverse what happened in 1910, but we can manage what we have in 2024. Basically, there is a host of practices that the Natural Resources Conservation Service will cost share on. Those cost share rates can go from 75 to 90% to really help offset the payments. There's another program that NRCS has called the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Several of those are focused on water quality, and they're using a host of different practices to address water quality, both from a drainage perspective, but also from, sediment or surface runoff. So prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, there was about $4 billion a year available through the Farm Bill programs, many of which could be used for water quality. Now we've got another 19.5 billion. So there's a significant amount of funding that's available to address this issue, Matthew.
There's one here about how much energy is required for the manure treatment system. Given energy requirements, how will this potentially compare to energy used in field application? Increase or decrease? I'm not sure who would be the best to answer that. Maybe that's you, David.
I guess I'll start. And really, I've asked that question of all the manure treatment kind of companies. For the quick wash, obviously Rick Johnson's on, so I'm not going to speak for him here. But my understanding that's mostly a chemical process. But what we generally find is with any of these, the greatest cost and energy really is in the transport, right? And the way you can reduce that is by dewatering. Separating out the components is the key to success and to the energy reduction standpoint. Extending the reach by dewatering. Also separating out that nitrogen, the phosphorus, is key to the economics and also from an energy perspective. My understanding, talking with Nurendorfer, is it's not a lot of energy for those electrical pulses. But Bryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, this is part of the discovery as we scale this up. They've indicated in our research is very little energy as far as, shocking the manure. And I equate it, we're trialing some pulse UV technologies right now, which we think can really lower cost in terms of UV disinfecting within some applications. So very similar, but to David's point, though, there's this larger question about the separating and the settling of the nutrients and how much energy is going to go into that separation. I'm assuming setting up a drying system and transportation. And we don't know that. That's why we're scaling up. Now, the first big question is, does it work at much larger sizes? And two, does it take any extra energy? And again, they claim no. And so far, everything we've seen supports that. But ask me the same question in about 5 months.
And I'll also mention, you always got to look at what the alternatives are. So, what's the energy cost of mining phosphorus, shipping it across the ocean, processing it, and then applying it, right? So we have this nutrient source right at home here, and how do you add value to it to then improve soil health in Northwest Ohio?
And phosphorus is only going to increase in price.
Yep.
Yeah. I think one of the great things about your talks that to my ears was hearing about the test beds. And this is something I hear a lot from companies, where can we test our product in a way that we can get third-party validation? Some sort of certification is always, an added bonus. I wonder, you've got great programs going on here, but there are obviously so many technologies coming in, as Bryan has talked about. We probably need more test beds, right? We need them in agriculture, especially. I hear this all the time. And I just wonder if you have any advice to states. I know we have some people from some of the state agencies on this call for how you shape one of these programs. For example, you're doing work, David, with Ohio State. How did that evolve? How did you end up setting up a program through their extension, I imagine?
So a lot of points there, and I'll start by kind of the key part of it is talking to your stakeholders, right? And that engagement. I learn everything, something new every time I talk to a farmer. A couple of the things that I didn't realize when I first started this, and it's kind of a separate program I was working on. This is applying dredged material from our harbors to our farm fields. in Northwest Ohio. And one thing they said to me is, I want to see 3 years worth of data, right? Don't show me one growing season, show me 3 at least, right? And that was key. And that's something that we incorporated into our programs. The other thing that they said to me is, if you're a farmer in Northwest Ohio, don't show me research down in Central Ohio. I want to see it on my neighbor's field, right? So those are some of the kind of key concepts. So I'd say start with the stakeholders, start with those conversations. Ohio State, they're an amazing university. We have a lot of great connections there. We had those established relationships, and so we have other amazing universities here as well: Bowling Green, Toledo, of course, Cleveland State, and and endless amazing institutions. But it's really developing those relationships and having conversations with people. Bryan, you're like the master at this, so I'll turn it over to you to answer that question.
I don't know about that. I think, Matthew, one thing for your group to think about is your own certification program, because there's not a broad blanket of certification X gets us there. I mean, we live in a world where, of course, all sorts of NSF type certifications on an ongoing regular basis. There's other, criteria out there, but ultimately we struggle with this, but we're talking about, even like if something successfully goes through our test bed, about some sort of certification as a stamp there. But does that get you approval by the Ohio EPA? Well, it depends on the technology, and it depends on, is it something that they regulate or not? Is it just something they support? So, I think groups like ours and groups like, the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance have a pretty cool opportunity to come around and say, maybe we have a team that comes together when something is scaling up in the test beds, put together a review panel, and have some sort of, it's a softer certification, but it moves beyond. Look, our corporates don't care so much about a university saying, this is great. They have different sort of questions. So, for me, it kind of starts there, but it hasn't been solved yet.
Yeah, and even going pre-certification, I'm thinking just about the test beds themselves and just sort of how the funding was structured for those, developing those. I guess that would be my main question, is how that all came together. And I also know, there are extension programs where extension researchers are involved, but they have their own research interests that aren't necessarily aligned with sort of the corporate interests in rolling out a product. And so how you kind of bridge that disparity.
I'm gonna just follow up comment there is our answer is to get it away from them as fast as possible, meaning we want to get the answers that they can help us with. And then if they want to run with it from their own research perspective, that's what they do. That's what, that's the core of their professional lives. We want to grab it as quickly as possible and say, does it work in the market? And, will people ultimately buy this? What should the cost be? What are the legal issues? We spend a lot of time on, this de-risking, and risk is everything. What do the insurance companies say? Is an insurance company willing to underwrite this product into the market? Those are the questions that we're looking at.
And I'll say, not all of our demonstration projects have a university associated with them. I would say maybe it's about half. So, it really depends on what the goals are, right? So for the Andersons project, the real key was independent third-party research, in which case we really needed an organization like the Ohio State University to lead up that independent research, because the Andersons could test their own product out and say, yeah, we tested it, it's great, right? But having a third party do it has a different type of legitimacy to it, right? But other projects like Rick Johnson's Quick Wash partnering with Regen, that's not affiliated with a research institution. That's really demonstrating to the farmers out on the fields, yes, we could do this on your field, and then promoting it through other means. So the research side of it was less important in that aspect.
And okay, one other thing, Matthew, just you've got some really great partners here. And where is the role of a water research foundation to help with this? validation component as well. We've worked deeply with them over the years, and we really respect when something gets funneled through them, that it has those non-interested from a financial perspective or research perspective eyeballs on it. So, you've got the ingredients.
Great. Rick Johnson did pipe in here about the manure cost, the energy costs, and he says regarding manure cost, the total cost, including energy and consumables, needs to be less than the cost of land application to be competitive. This should not include the value of the recovered nutrients. This is the icing on the cake. Okay, so that's the energy and consumables need to be less than that of cost of land application. Then we had a question from For the Water Alliance. This is for you, Bryan. Has the NSF Water Innovation Engine already been funded? And when will the rollout of that occur? If not, is there a submission method?
So yeah, it's been funded effective March 1st of this year. So it's active. Now, look, this is a massively broad coalition. I think there were 100 partners, of which maybe a dozen plus, 1 or 2, 13, 14 total are receiving funding. We're one of those receiving funding. There will be a call out for competitive grants and competitive kind of research opportunities. And I don't have the timeline on those yet, only because it's been, whatever it is, 8 weeks. So, look for those. But look, our partners in Chicago, Current, or if you just go to the Great Lakes Renew website, you should be able to sign up for getting some initial information. You can always reach out to me. There's also the building up of a research kind of coalition as a separate part of the Great Lakes Renew, just like there is with industry partners. So whether you fall into that, we're happy to make those introductions with the project lead for that particular part of Renew. But I'll say one other thing so nobody hits me up for money. We don't have the funding yet, but we're on the clock as of March 1. As with any federal program, it's generally on a reimbursement method.
Great, thanks. And with that, we're getting close to time here, gents. I really want to thank you for the time you put into putting the presentations together, and for the time you spent here today making these presentations. This is really great work, and glad to see it moving forward. And I want to thank the audience for coming too, and remind you that if you want to see this on YouTube, probably in the next week or two, we'll have the video up there, and we'll promote it on our LinkedIn and our newsletter, which you can also sign up for on our website at phosphorusalliance.org. So with that, thanks to all of you, and I hope you have a good day, and keep going. It's great stuff.